I wanted to hop on here and just record a little bit of a conversation in regards to max days in the gym. This particular recording is going to serve a couple purposes. One, our Middle Path CrossFit community, we are getting ready to start a new strength cycle. And so here over the next couple days, we are going to be taking on a 1 rep max back squat lift to kickstart our squat strength cycle. In doing that, I want to give just some information and some philosophy that we hold within our space that may or may not be relevant to anybody else that is listening. Concurrently, we are launching a podcast that is going to dive in to more than just gym things. I'm not entirely sure where this is going to fall in the episode list and which recording this will actually be in connection to some other things that we're going to be putting out there. But I also wanted to make sure that I captured it for more than just our in-house community. With that being said, follow along. If you are finding this on our podcast, know that both myself and Dr. James is also going to be joining me for a lot of these conversations. We've got a lot more things coming to you, but we also thought that this would be a nice way to kill two birds with one stone. When it comes to max days, I often find that for some people, it is a very exciting thing to see on the schedule. There are a couple different demographics of people within the CrossFit space, of those who really enjoy lifting heavy and those who do not and prefer more of the cardio and the metcons. So if you see the max day on the schedule, you may look at that and say, oh, lifting heavy, lifting to failure really intimidates me or scares me. And there's another set of people that are going to look at that and they're going to be super pumped and it's going to be one of their favorite days in the gym that week. We are getting ready to start a new training cycle. It's been a little bit since we've been in a groove with strength training within our gym. We follow HWPO affiliate. When we first opened about a year ago, I did a lot of the programming those first handful of months, mostly because most of our members were brand new to CrossFit. Some of them have not a lot of fitness background, haven't spent a ton of time in the gym, but I wanted to make sure that when we started, we were introducing the movements at the right pace, not even just the lifts and taking the time on the technicality there, but also layering in all the other everyday movements that we see within our CrossFit programming. For the last, I would say 6, 7, maybe even 8 months, we've been following HWPO affiliate. It's been really great programming, a really good fit for our community. I still do a bit of in-house edits depending on where we're at and some patterns and stuff that we're noticing as coaches. But for the most part, I think what's been really great about it is we have been able to just follow it through and stick with it, and which is awesome. So in that, we went through a little bit of a prep for the Open. The CrossFit Open just happened. The last couple weeks have been transitional weeks. We had a deload week in there. And then last week, we saw things starting to ramp up again, getting ready for this new training cycle that starts tomorrow. This cycle is going to focus on squat strength, and it's also going to cover endurance and stamina. So we're going to be getting under some heavier percentages, but we're also going to be squatting in volume and working on speed. Really looking forward to it. We have, I would say, lifting-oriented community. And at the same time, we have a few members that have been with us just long enough to be around and really settle in, but have not really gone through a structured training cycle just yet. I want to provide a little information on what to expect, particularly around the benchmarks and the max days, and why we need them, why we do them, and just some different things to keep in mind as we head into this cycle. I'm a real big believer in not only the physical side of what we're doing and the nuts and bolts of why, but I would say there's a huge psychological component too that I like to make sure is coming through. Our community seems to really gravitate towards the whys, which is awesome. And part of that might be my coaching style and just what we've built as we've grown. But There are probably some coaches and affiliate owners that may be listening to this and be like, your members don't really care. Our community seems to really gravitate towards understanding why and what they're doing. And 95% of them are here simply because they just want to feel better in life. Whenever we start a new cycle, typically what happens is we have what is called a testing week or a baseline week, in which whatever the objective of that training cycle is, we have a day, 2 days, maybe 3 spread out that become these test days, if you will. And what they are for is for us to take a snapshot picture of each athlete and where they are in their current state of health and fitness and life. Everything is intentionally programmed and is for a reason. I think that's one thing that is different about CrossFit. And not to say that other forms of fitness don't have this, but as random as CrossFit may feel, the programming and the objective of what we're trying to do is for a reason. And so whether you're following programming or doing your own or the coach is doing their own, right? It's for a reason and it's not just because. And within that, we want a snapshot of where we are in the current so that over the course of the length of that cycle, when we get to the end and we retest, we get to see the progress. I think shorter training cycles are tricky. Our next cycle is only 6 weeks long. For me as a coach, I'm not expecting huge gains, but we do want to see progress and the consistency of showing up to the gym and following this and sticking to the program and trusting the program is part of what is going to get us there. Over the course of a year of training, ideally people are getting more fit. And more fit can be stronger. They're moving with better technique. They're recovering better. There's a whole spectrum of how we classify that. So breaking it down into these small chunks, I like to think about it as just check-in points. We want to make sure that nobody's sliding backwards, that we're at least maintaining an on path for growth. So something like a training cycle, right? We're not expecting people to necessarily put on or gain 20 pounds on their back squat lift in 6 weeks. The weight wins are great, but we're really going to kind of dial in some other areas of what it means to truly like PR a lift. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So that's what this is all for, right? It allows us to track progress. And progress means that the programming is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Progress also means that the coaches are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So if we take that snapshot across the board and we get to the end of the 6 weeks and nobody's really progressed and it feels like everyone's in the same place, what we start to look at is, are we as coaches doing our job to make sure that is coming through and messaging, that we're holding people to standard and that we're not just showing up, squatting and going home. And so we need the max days and the baseline tests within training cycles, I think, for that. And that looks different with every cycle. We've done a couple cycles where the focus was just on I would say volume, but it was get your heart rate up, keep you moving. We didn't actually have any baseline tests with that because we were just trying to get people moving, keep people moving for longer periods of time. But with a strength cycle, it's nice to know where we are in the current. For us, for our community, we're in a place where we've had some people that have gone through this. We have another handful that have not. And what I find with heavy lifting days and max days is you end up with 2 groups of people. So you have one group of people who absolutely love the lifting and the heavy lifts, and they get super pumped about a 1 rep max day because this is their time to really dig in and show the work that they've been putting in. Even though we're starting a cycle, they've still been with us a year, so the training is still happening. Then you've got another group of people who are a little more apprehensive, nervous, intimidated, lots of different reasons that they're not as hyped about seeing the 1 rep max within the programming. And I want to cover a couple different things. And this is probably going to mostly feel like I'm talking to our Middle Path community, which is part of the reason I'm recording this, right? We've covered like why we need it, right? Like we want that snapshot. I always tell my athletes, it's okay to feel a little nervous about lifting heavy. It means you respect the weights. I am much more concerned about the athlete that comes in that's just ready to like rip and grip, just jumping in and diving in. And is the concern is not the same thing as like fear, right? But being a little nervous and recognizing what role this plays in your training. Truthfully, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, we don't want that to hold us back. We want to feel like we can lean in and try and whatever that may be for that person. But that is an element of training, right? Not feeling 100% ready, being a little intimidated. At this point, then we're not looking at necessarily a physical growth, but a mental one. And that's okay. That's part of the work too. I've had a couple conversations. It was probably a few training cycles ago. I had an athlete who is around on the regular. I usually see them 4 or 5 days a week that skipped a max day. When we were doing a new training cycle, we get to check in and, hey, how are things going? And part of that conversation was just, I didn't feel ready. They had a lot going on in their life at the time, and I didn't feel ready. I haven't been sleeping well. My nutrition's been way off. It was a perfect storm of all these things, if you will. And they didn't want to do the max day because they knew they weren't going to do better. And showing up and not doing better was they were worried about the lack of progress that they thought they were going to see. And so we ended up having a beautiful conversation around all of it. I think it's so tricky within our world in general. And I say world as in macro world, not just CrossFit or even our community, where people have this need to feel like we're always winning and always on the uptick. And part of the conversation I had with this athlete was, it's okay that not every season that we're going to be in is about growth. Maintenance is nice. Even just simply showing up and honoring the fact that, yeah, like life's been really hard lately, yeah, but I'm here. And this is still a benchmark of where we are in the current. It doesn't change the reality of that. And so it was a really good conversation and unfolding, but also is how do we make sure that we're communicating with our athletes that it's not always about, oh, I don't think I'm going to do well today, so I'm just not going to show up. This isn't about the leaderboard. It's not about adding 5, 10, 15 pounds to a lift. It's just simply you showing up for yourself at a time when maybe you need it. And, what I've found, I've been coaching for, oh gosh, I think I'm going on 5 years now. There have been times when we look back and you hit another stressful chapter in your life and you look back and you're like, wow, like how I'm handling this stress and this chaos and storm and whatever it is that I'm going through, I'm handling this much better now than I did 2 years ago. So you're also setting benchmarks that you may not know that you need yet. And which is just show up, be willing to be where you are, be willing to not necessarily be better and be doing better. That's okay. It's going to make the wins that do come feel even greater. But that's part of the longevity, right? In health and wellness and fitness is just showing up day in, day out and know that you're doing this for a reason greater than the accolades and the leaderboard and the big number PRs. So that was a great conversation that I got to have. And then I've also had a few throughout the years of people who are just intimidated by the idea of lifting heavy. And I take a little bit of pride in trying to turn people into lifters. I am definitely biased towards all things lifting. Anyone who knows me knows that I would much prefer lifting over any of the cardio stuff. And so I really love the personal wins of being willing to try and go for it. And for people that didn't think that it was possible to lift the thing that they're lifting. And we don't get there overnight, right? And we start within those edges. Part of what we're going to talk about in a little bit is what PRing, what hitting a new personal best or personal record actually looks like, and how we as coaches assess that. But it's fun to take someone who lives on an empty barbell. We don't have people that are trying to push a lot of the weights, right? We have someone that comes in that's in their 60s and 70s. They don't need to be squatting 400 pounds, right? That's not the goal. Where we're trying to get them to is different, but watching them go from living on the training bar to slowly adding some weight and then wanting to progress themselves to the 35 or the 45-pound bar is really cool. And I love for it to be their idea. We want to keep them moving safe. There's a balance in coaching between you are capable of doing this and I think you can do more, and it coming from them. And I think when it comes from them, it's more empowering and they are much more confident in it rather than just coach said that I can, so I guess I can. I want you to believe that you can. When it comes to max days, ultimately the purpose of our max day is to find our edge. And I always tell my athletes the edges are either physical, technical, or mental. And so you're going to hit one of those walls first. And for the physical people, that is the load and the weight on the bar, right? You're only going to squat so much. And we want to make sure that we're doing it safely. So the physical and technical kind of overlap. But I think that when we hit those edges, it's either a technical edge or a mental edge overlaps with the weight on the bar. And you're going to reach a point where that's just it, right? You stand it up or you fail a rep, and that is that. And now we have our number. And the technical piece, when we start getting under heavier loads and new loads, not looking for it to be a picture perfect squat. Your warm-up sets, as you start lighter and start warming up, everything should still be where it needs to be. And we want to dial that in and focus that in. But as you get a little heavier or you're touching a new weight, you may not move perfectly, but we still want you moving safely. One of the things that I always say is it can be ugly, it just can't be dangerous. And there's a little bit of a wobble that we expect to happen under those heavier loads. We just want to make sure that when it wobbles, it's not a safety issue. Those are the two big fails and edges that I think we see with max days. If you don't sneak up against them, are we really maxing? Which is another big conversation, which for me is where the mental comes in. There are also our mental edges of, I don't really want to try this. I've already done a couple weights that I didn't know that I could do, and I'm just not sure that I'm ready to try. We still coach them through that. But at the end of the day, I want you to be ready to move that bar, and I need you to feel confident underneath it. Even if you're not sure that you can do it, I need you to be confident in the effort. And if you get to a place where you're just like, I don't know about this, then we're done. And that is also the threshold that we reach within that work. I've seen athletes before have a certain weight on the bar and they go to pick it up and they put it down and they're like, absolutely not. I'm just not ready. And I don't know how I feel about this. And by the time we reset and redo our max days, they approach it with more confidence and they're ready for it. And they either get it or they don't. But even in that, the willingness to try and lean in, those are also edges that we're looking for. Anytime we're lifting a weight, those are the three areas that we're looking for. If you are one of our athletes watching this, you're going to hear this shtick again on Monday. But just know that it's not always about, it is lifting to failure. You're going to see that terminology, right? But we're lifting to edge. And within that it can be physical. It can be your ability to move the weight. It can be form is starting to break down and it's just not a good idea to keep going. And it can also be like, nah, I'm pretty good here and I just don't feel ready for that next step. All of those are okay. What we are looking for over the next 6 weeks as we continue to grind and move through that is that when we retest, that maybe you're willing to try, maybe the squats that you do move a little smoother. There's all sorts of ways that we kind of track progress that I'm going to get into here in a minute. But just know that it's not always about the weight that's on the bar. And I think we say it as coaches, but I do think that it gets lost. And it's important to make sure that we continue to give those permissions. And so it's an interesting process to have such diverse feelings about lifting days. I've coached some people over the years that are like, I just don't really care about the heavy lifting days. And it's not a hype. It's also not I avoid it because I'm nervous. And the I don't care isn't actually intended to be I just don't care about the training that I'm doing. I'm just here to move well and stay healthy and move my body. And it's not important that that kind of comes around. And for that group of person that kind of feels that way about training, that's where we get into, and it is about them and their training, but that's where we get into the helpfulness for coaching. That's great. Like, I don't need you to find that. I don't need you to take that over the top and really dive in and dig in. But I do need to know that you're getting better, right? You're doing CrossFit because you love the movements. And a lot of people get attracted to CrossFit because of the coaching. And ultimately, the product, if you will, that we are selling is the coaching and progress and fitness and health. And these markers are things that help us assess that the product that we're offering is working. And so if we don't have the tests, we don't get to use, we have other ways that we can check in with that, but it's also helpful for us to know that we're moving things in the right direction, not just for the community as a whole, but for the individual people that are here. We want you getting better, feeling better, and that may look different. Maintenance is also a thing, right? You may not be the person that wants to always challenge those edges and squat more and more, but we also want to make sure that it's not getting harder for you to move those weights, because if that's the case, there's something is going on as well. So there's, like I said, a lot of different angles to this, and ultimately just come in, show up, do your best. It's going to be great. It is fun to hit those kind of benchmark numbers. It can be fun to just hit those different thresholds. Using different plates is usually the thing. It's like, oh, I always use the 10s or the 15s, and now I'm using the 25s. There's much bigger conversations that I'm sure we're going to have around some of the psychology of being in the gym, but just come in, do your best, be where you are. It's totally okay. And we get to take it from there and see how we keep you moving. A lot of this conversation has been about the whys, right? Whys and what we're looking for within max days. The other thing that I like people to be aware of, not everybody's testing for the first time. We've got a couple athletes that have been doing CrossFit on and off for over a decade. We've got people who have been with us specifically for a year. So they've done a couple back squat max days, and they're this want and need to chase those numbers, which is great. And one of the things that I always tell people when it comes to retests is that hitting a personal record and hitting a personal best look vastly different time to time. And the one way that I think most athletes measure in their brain is by the weight on the bar. It's an easy thing that they can see. That is, I used to be able to squat 200 pounds. Now I can squat 250. I know that I'm getting better. And it's beautiful. It is one of the goals, right? We want things trending in that direction. But what gets missed is that when we show up, moving better in general is also a win. Those are technical wins. So maybe we hit 215 on a lift, and when we retest, we hit 215 again, and we just couldn't get the 220, 225. But that 215 the first time around was the ugly, not dangerous category, right? We completed the lift, we did it, but it was like, okay, we're done because things are starting to break down. And this time it was much more technically sound, smoother. We were more confident approaching it. And so we may not have put on the extra strength and the weight, but we are moving better. Those are also wins. It's important for those to not get lost. The mental wins are the other ones. And it can be a similar approach, right? Like last time I approached the 215, I was really nervous. I felt good in trying. And this time I just walked up to the bar, picked it up, and moved it. And so all of those are wins. And we have to keep in mind the goal with max days over time as we collect that information is we check in with how's our sleep, how's our stress, how's our nutrition. And when you maxed last time, you may have been at your best. You may have had the best night's sleep, your nutrition's dialed in, not a whole lot going on. And we retest now and maybe we've got some stuff going on, or like last night was the night that we just didn't sleep. We just got over being sick a couple weeks ago, whatever that might be. This falls back into that category of don't not test. You may surprise yourself and do better than you think you'll do. And at the same time, we keep track of all of that as well. So we get to have that conversation of, hey, let's look and compare. And ultimately, if life feels like it's in the same place and nothing's really changed on that front, then we start to ask different questions. And at the same time, it's okay that we don't PR every max day. PRs are not the goal of heavy lifting days. They're beautiful and they're wonderful when they come around, but they are not the objective of what we are trying to do. It's really hard. I'm guilty of it as well. As someone who loves the lifting, it's easy to get caught in the trap of, I just want more. I want to see more. And we've got to remember that hitting a personal best and hitting those records may look different at different chapters and stages of where we are. If you're someone that you've done a couple max days, just know that you're not getting worse, right? I always tell people the range that I like to see people in is plus or minus 5, 10, maybe 15 pounds. It depends on the lift. So we talk about that based on each individual lift. If it's 200 and we hit 190 today, right? That's like you're close. That's a matter of a single lift. Maybe we didn't warm up as well as we could have. Maybe we just didn't have it today, and that's okay. We could do this again in a week and a half, and maybe you hit 215. And so it's a timing thing. It's where are we at in the current, but just don't fall into the trap of chasing the numbers. The numbers are great and they're exciting, but it doesn't also mean that you're not getting better. One thing we see a lot within our community because of who we have within our community is we see a lot of technical wins. That is, we have a lot of individuals that start squatting, specifically squatting to targets. And over time, the goal is to get them to full range of motion. And we will see where that kind of falls in the greater picture of things. But I remember the last squatting cycle we did, we had individuals who got really strong through the range of motion that they had. And we used boxes and med balls to guide that target. And by the end of that cycle, we weren't lifting any weight, but we got our first full range of motion air squat, which is a big deal. That's an instance where we dropped the load and we took that away, but then was able to have them moving better. And then we get to build from there. Now let's continue to dial in the mobility and work through those ranges of motion. And then also get you stronger now through a new range of motion that you have. So those are all wins as well. So yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it for our community. We've been in CrossFit open mode for a while, a lot of Metcons, a lot of cardio. So I'm excited. They're fun to coach. And yeah, we'll go from there. As you're watching this, if you are somebody who's part of our community, when you have any questions, just know we're going to go over all of this in class. If you have any questions, reach out to a coach and we'll get you settled away. But enjoy the lifting and we'll see you next time.